Hello and welcome back to the Collective Minds podcast. Tonight you got me, Astral, and your boy Jay.
Yo,
So, Jay, I think tonight we're going to talk about some UFO stuff, specifically the alleged first ever alien UFO abduction ever recorded ever. Many might know it, many might not. It is the Barney and Betty Hill incident. So, just imagine you're with your wife, right? You go on this big
right?
trip to Canada and the Grand Canyon. And on your way back, on some back roads, driving in the middle of the night, you see this light. Your wife's tripping. She's like, "What is that? That's weird." And you're like, "Oh, it's probably just an airplane." And she's going, "No, it's a shooting star." And all of a sudden, it gets closer and closer and closer. And both of you are like, "That's not an airplane." And she's like, "That's not a shooting star." And all of a sudden, it flies in front of you. And you pull over and stop. You're looking at it and you're confused, and many things are happening that until later you don't recall. One of those things being, though, that you're trying to grab the gun on your hip. Every time you try to grab it, for some reason, some unseen force pulls your hand away. So let's get into it, the Betty and Barney Hill story. So they were an American couple who claimed they were abducted by extraterrestrials in a rural portion of the state of New Hampshire from September 19th to 20, 1961. The incident came to be called the Hill Abduction or the Zeta Reticuli incident because of the star map shown to Betty Hill. It could possibly be the Zeta Reticuli system, according to some researchers. Their story was adapted into the best-selling 1966 book, The Interrupted Journey, and the 1975 television film, The UFO Incident. Most of Betty Hill's notes, tapes, and other items have been placed in the permanent collection of the University of New Hampshire, her alma mater. In July 2011, the New Hampshire Division of Historical Resources marked the site of the alleged craft's first approach with a historical marker. The Hill story was widely publicized in books and movies. Let's go to the UFO encounter. According to a variety of reports given by the Hills, the alleged UFO sighting happened about 10:30 p.m. on September 19th, 1961. The Hills were driving back to Portsmouth from a vacation in Niagara Falls and Montreal. Just south of Lancaster, New Hampshire, Betty claimed to have observed a bright point of light in the sky that moved from below the moon and the planet Jupiter, now upward toward the west of the moon, while Barney navigated U.S. Route 3. Betty reasoned that she was observing a falling star, only it moved upward. Because it moved erratically and grew bigger and brighter, Betty urged Barney to stop the car for a closer look, as well to walk their dog, Delcy. Barney stopped at a scenic point area just south of Twin Mountain. Betty, looking through binoculars, observed an odd-shaped craft flashing multicolored lights traveling across the face of the moon. Because her sister had several years earlier said she had seen a flying saucer, Betty thought it might be what she was observing. Through binoculars, Barney observed what he reasoned was a commercial airliner traveling toward Vermont on its way to Montreal. However, he soon changed his mind because without looking as if it had turned, the craft rapidly descended in his direction. This observation caused Barney to realize this object that was a plane was not a plane. Now, there's a ton of these stories like this that I recall when you hear of UFO abductions. People driving down the road, all of a sudden losing time, disappearing, something happens, they see a lot of lights, they're on an operation table. This is literally the first one of these. So if any of it is more accurate of how the original description began, it was this one. And then the other ones could have been kind of copycats or, I mean, there's thousands of them. So I'm doubting with that fact. I'm sure they all experienced something around the same. However, these were the first original people. So now the Hills said they continued driving on the isolated road, moving very slowly through Franconia Notch in order to observe the object as it came even closer. At one point, the object passed above a restaurant and a signal tower on top of Cannon Mountain and came out near the old man of the mountain. Betty testified that it was at least 1.5 times the length of the granite cliff profile, which was 40 feet, and that it seemed to be rotating. The couple watched as the silent, illuminated craft moved erratically and bounced back and forth in the night sky. About 1 mile south of Indian Head, they said the object rapidly descended towards their vehicle, causing Barney to stop in the middle of the highway. The huge, silent craft hovered about 80 to 100 feet above the Hills' 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air and filled the entire field of view in the windshield. It reminded Barney of a huge pancake. Carrying his pistol in his pocket, he stepped away from the vehicle and moved closer to the object. Using his binoculars, Barney claimed to have seen 8 to 11 humanoid figures who were peering out of the craft's windows, seeming to look at him in unison. All but one figure moved to what appeared to be a panel in the rear wall of the hallway that encircled the front portion of the craft. The one remaining figure continued to look at Barney and communicated a message telling him to stay where you are, but keep looking. Barney had a recollection of observing the humanoid forms wearing glossy black uniforms and black caps. Red lights on what appeared to be bat wing fins began to telescope out of the sides of the craft, and a long structure descended from the bottom of the craft. The silent craft then approached to what Barney estimated was within 50 to 80 feet overhead and 300 feet away from him. Then on October 21st, 1961, Barney reported to the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, or NICAP, investigator Walter Webb, that the beings were somehow not human. So that's your stereotypical kind of what you get with a story, other than what happens inside or what happens in between. That's the very beginning of what happened to these people, allegedly. Just they just saw this thing and something happened. And it sounds a lot like they kind of forgot everything. They ended up making it home somehow, or it was later. But there was weird feelings that they had, weird things they did, and we're getting into that right here. So arriving home at about dawn, the Hills stated that they had some odd sensations and impulses they could not readily explain. Like Betty, she insisted that their luggage be kept near the back door rather than in the main part of the house. The watches that they were wearing never worked again. Barney said that the leather strap for his binoculars were torn, though he could not recall tearing it. The toes of his best dress shoes were scraped, and Barney says that he was compelled to examine his genitals in the bathroom. Though he found nothing unusual, they both took long showers to remove possible contamination. They each drew a picture of what they had observed. So they remembered something had happened, but they could not remember clearly. They just knew something weird had happened that night before they got home. Perplexed, the Hills say they tried to reconstruct the chronology of events as they witnessed the UFO and drove home. But immediately after they heard the buzzing sounds, their memories became incomplete and fragmented. After sleeping for a few hours, Betty awoke and placed the shoes and clothing she had worn during the drive into her closet, observing that the dress was torn at the hem, zipper, and lining. Later, when she retrieved the items from her closet, she noticed a pinkish powder on her dress. She hung the dress on her clothesline. The pink powder blew away, but the dress was irreparably damaged. She threw it away, but then later changed her mind, retrieved the dress, and hung it in her closet. Over the years, 5 laboratories have conducted chemical and forensic analysis on the dress. There were shiny, concentric circles on their car's trunk that had not been there the previous day. Betty and Barney experimented with a compass, noting that when they moved it close to the spots, the needle would whirl rapidly, but when they moved it a few inches away from the shiny spots, it would drop down. All right, Jay. So they show back up at home. Things are blurry. Things are damaged. Stuff's weird. They're acting weird. They feel violated. Sounds like a really good night out, but these are like wholesome people. And you know what I mean? And like they're, I don't know, 50s, 40s, 50s, just traveling and everything, trying to make their way home. And all of a sudden this happens. What do you think? What do you think is going on here? What are you taking from this so far about this? With the whole, like the compass being weird around the car. I mean, I know what I think. As soon as I hear weird stuff, they're feeling weird. Reminds me of a damn microwave.
Well, it's evident that something happened to them. Um, Whatever happened, I think those beings took the car or did something to the car, which why would a compass go haywire? Yeah, it's like a classic abduction story.
It is, right? It's like it
Missing
almost,
time.
yeah, it's like it fits textbook style UFO abduction.
Yeah.
Stuff they put in movies, stuff. Yeah, I mean, you could turn on the TV today and see someone claiming the same exact thing happened to them. I think of electromagnetic frequencies when I think of the compass spinning weirdly. And then with the whole weird feeling they got, I think of radiation.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah.
And then he noticed like his shoes were scuffed. The
It was dragged.
Yeah, exactly. The belt was, or the strap was snapped off of his binoculars, and he doesn't remember that. There's almost like a struggle or something with that. And then her dress was torn up, which like struggle, but I mean, they felt weird. So, I mean, it's kind of, I don't know. I'm sure in like certain situations where people wake up and they don't remember what happened, but they know something happened. And they're like, gross, I need to take a shower. I'm getting those kind of vibes on this too. But so they did make it home and they knew something was wrong. They didn't know what, though, at the time. So there was an initial report to the U.S. Air Force and NICAP. Let's hit that. So Walter N. Webb, a Boston astronomer, An NICAP, NICAP member met with the Hills on October 21st, 1961. In a 6-hour interview, the Hills related all they could remember of the UFO encounter. Barney stated that he had developed a mental block and that he suspected there were some portions of the event that he did not wish to remember. He described in detail all that he could remember about the craft and the appearance of the somehow not human figures aboard it. Webb stated that they were telling the truth and the incident probably occurred exactly as reported, except for some minor uncertainties and technicalities that must be tolerated in any such observations where human judgment is involved. For example, exact time and length of visibility, apparent sizes of object and occupants, distance and height of object, etc. All right. Let's get into Betty's dreams. How about that? So, 10 days after the alleged UFO encounter, Betty began having a series of vivid dreams, which continued for 5 successive nights. She stated that she experienced them with a degree of detail and intensity that she had never had before. After the 5th night, they stopped and never recurred, though they occupied her thoughts during the day. When she mentioned them to Barney, he was sympathetic, but not too concerned, and the matter was dropped. Betty did not mention them to Barney again. So it sounds like they reported it. They were interviewed for 6 hours. Barney was like, no, he didn't want this. Something he recalled in that interview, right? That he felt that his brain didn't want to remember, that he didn't want to remember. Almost like he knew whatever he would remember was bad. It was fucked up. It was fucked, and he didn't want to remember it. So she starts having these dreams about it and tries to tell her husband about it. And he's like, no, described as not too concerned. And the matter was dropped. So, I mean, back in, the day, he didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
He wanted to leave it behind. So in November 1961, Betty began writing down the details of her dreams. In one dream, she and Barney encountered a roadblock and men who surrounded their car. She lost consciousness, but struggled to regain it. Then she realized that she was being forced by 2 small men to walk in a forest at night, and of seeing Barney walking behind her. Though when she called to him, he seemed to be in a trance or sleepwalking. The men stood about 5 feet to 5 feet 4 inches tall and wore matching blue uniforms, with caps similar to those worn by military cadets. They appeared nearly human, with black hair, dark eyes, prominent noses, and bluish lips. Their skin was a grayish color. She and Barney were taken to their car, where the leader suggested that they wait to watch the craft's departure. They did so and then resumed their drive home. That's a really interesting dream.
Sounds like hybrids, like gray alien human hybrids.
Alien human hybrids. Something. I was actually talking about this earlier. I do have a theory on this, which we will get to shortly. So this one, having read Webb's initial report, Jackson and Holman had many questions for the Hills. So some more researchers. One of their main questions was about the length of the trip. Although the Hills had noted that they had arrived home later than anticipated, the 178-mile drive should have taken about 4 hours. They did not realize that they had arrived home 7 hours after their departure from Colebrook, so 3 hours extra. When Holman and Jackson noticed this discrepancy, the couple had no explanation. The Hills claimed to recall almost nothing of the 35 miles of US Route 3 between Lincoln and Indian Head and Ashland. Both claimed to recall an image of a fiery orb sitting on the ground. Betty and Barney reasoned that it must have been the moon, but Holman and Jackson informed them that the moon had set earlier in the evening. The subject of hypnosis came up, and it was decided that it should be carried out in order to recover previously irretrievable memories. Barney was apprehensive, but thought it might help put Betty to rest with what Barney described as the nonsense about her dreams. So Barney was scared shitless, is what I'm getting of this. This guy did not want to go about this anymore. I don't know if he just, it's, kind of like with war or anything that happens to a lot of people. He seems like an old style kind of guy that goes through something and he's like, I just want to move on, bury it. She's trying to figure out what the hell just happened,
Yeah. Sounds like PTSD.
Yeah, it does sound like PTSD. I remember that. He had the crazy urge to wash his genitals. So on November 23rd, 1962, the Hills attended a meeting at the parsonage of their church where Captain Ben H. Sweat of the United States Air Force was a guest speaker. Having had an interest in hypnosis, the Hills approached Sweat privately and related their strange encounter. Sweat was particularly interested in the missing time of the Hills' account. The Hills asked if he would hypnotize them to recover their memories, but Sweat declined and cautioned them against going to an amateur hypnotist, such as himself. So then they do end up finding a hypnotist. And that's where really the story takes off, is because the original details weren't, they were a big thing, I guess, especially because this is the first story of this kind. But people are like, you're crazy. They were shunned crazy, all that stuff for years, right? But they went to the hypnotist, and people can think what they want about it, but it is good meditation, all that stuff. And I've seen it in action and all that good stuff. But being able to put your mind in a place and then be guided into either suppressed memories by force or suppressed memories by accident, they're able to pull some of that juice back up and get your brain flowing with it. So under hypnosis, Barney reported that the binocular strap had broken when he ran from the UFO back to his car. Boom, finding out answers. He recalled driving the car away from the UFO, but that afterwards he felt irresistibly compelled to pull off the road and drive into the woods. He eventually sighted 6 men standing in the dirt road. The car stalled, and 3 of the men approached the car. They told Barney not to fear them. He was still anxious, however, and he reported that the leader told Barney to close his eyes. While hypnotized, Barney said, I felt like the eyes had pushed into my eyes. So remember a while ago, Jay, we were talking, I can't remember what story it was. I think it was a cryptid. Oh, yes, it was. I think it was it Mothman? Where the guys were on dirt bikes and all of a sudden they stalled. Do you remember that? That was a while ago. And we were trying to figure
Oh,
out with Ledger.
it was the other cryptid.
So not Mothman.
Yeah. A similar the ferret looking one.
Jeff the Mongoose?
Yeah, wasn't that one?
I think it
Is it
was
that?
Mothman. Or was it the Jersey Devil? I can't remember.
That too. Yeah.
So many cryptids. Yeah, tons of them. But yeah, that's interesting. All right. So Barney described the beings as generally similar to Betty's hypnotic, non-dream recollection. The beings often stared into his eyes, said Barney, with a terrifying, mesmerizing effect. Under hypnosis, Barney said things like, "Oh, those eyes, they're in my brain." And I was told to close my eyes because I saw 2 eyes coming close to mine, and I felt like the eyes had pushed into my eyes. And all I see are these eyes. I'm not even afraid that they're not connected to a body. They're just there. They're just up close to me, pressing against my eyes. While Betty reported a conversation with the leader in English, Barney said that he heard them speaking in a mumbling language he did not understand. Betty also mentioned this detail. The few times they communicated with him, Barney said it seemed to be thought transference. At that time, he was unfamiliar with the word telepathy. So they were speaking in their mind. Let me go to Betty's sessions. Under hypnosis, Betty's account was similar to her 5 dreams about the UFO abduction, with some notable differences, mainly pertaining to her capture and release. Also, the technology on the craft was different. The short men differed significantly in physical appearance, and the sequential order of the abduction differed. Barney's and Betty's memories and hypnotic regression were, however, consistent with one another. So it looks like it's not going to go into that. So, more details I got for this. You can listen to the recordings online. I'm not going to attach them or play them here. However, these people aren't talking like they're all calm. They start screaming like they're in pain. Betty talks about them putting a needle into her stomach, how they were pretty much dragged onto the craft, but they weren't necessarily fighting. They were in like a hypnotic state, and they could hear these words being put into their head. They were brought on there, and they had the whole, white room, weird stuff going on with them, needle in her belly button, some sort of device over Barney's genitals, going back to your stereotypical UFO abduction that they talk about all the time. Had everything. One thing I'm not seeing here, though, is allegedly Betty, at the end of it, towards the end, she was like awake enough to kind of move around. And she alleged that she had tried grabbing a book and taking it or hiding it to bring it back with her to be like, this is proof. Because it was like they hadn't forgotten yet before they left and were back at their vehicle. And the leader, the quote leader, was like freaked out about it. And she tried arguing with him. And then she was like, well, where are you from? Like trying to get details about what is this? What's going on? And he showed her a map. And on that map was a bunch of dots with lines connecting and everything. And he said, do you know where you are right now? And she said, no, allegedly. And he said, well, how can I show you where I'm from if you don't even know where you are? Very interesting story. This is where it all began when it came to the thousands and thousands of other ones that are. So anyway, Jay, they they tried putting this together, the Zeta Reticuli system of a star map. What they believe that they showed her was some sort of map of the stars, right? We can go into this working theory and that's fine. However, I kind of believe something different here about the whole thing, also with the map. I don't believe the map is of the stars, in my opinion, when you look at it. And it's only because the other day we saw a map in the group that was very interesting. Remember that map where it showed continents on it
Yep.
of the
Yep.
planet we're on, the different ones, all the different ones?
Yep.
That's what it looked like to me.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Just like how they name extraterrestrial, it doesn't mean outer space, it means extra, like territory. So, very interesting with that part. Also, I was talking about this earlier as well. There's quite a possibility that what happened to these people, because one thing I didn't say this entire time is, back in the 60s, 50s, 60s, they were an interracial couple. Barney was a black guy and Betty was a white lady. And I mean, not too crazy, but my opinion is if you wanted to hit multiple main races in a country with news, you'd involve both of them. It was kind of around the time of the Cold War era, beginning of it, or right around when it started getting hot. People started seeing these weird things in the skies. And they started going, oh, that's Russia crafts. Those are Russian crafts or Russian missiles or Russian weapons. And the government was like, no, they're weather balloons. They're weather balloons. And people didn't fall for that. Then the government's like, oh, what do you think? They're green little Martians from outer space. And government's the first people that said that. So I
So
kind of
during
got,
that time period, that's after World War II, right?
uh huh.
Well, after um, the US or us, uh, used atomic bombs, that's when a whole bunch of UFOs started to show up, right? And what's to say that these abductions are like their version of scientists trying to like, hey, these guys are becoming more advanced, they're becoming smarter. We gotta observe them kind of thing. You know, like how we observe like animals in the wild or in captivity.
Oh, yeah. Like you're being watched and studied.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of different angles of this. The one I'm seeing is the government seemed to be like, oh, what do you think those are? Aliens. And that way we're not like, oh, those are crafts. Cause maybe we were onto something or people were onto something. However, they weren't Russian. If you know what I mean, if they were the United States technology that wasn't supposed to be released yet or whatever, kind of that thing. And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, 5 years later, they have an abduction case. And this is where it gets really interesting is there's a lot of these cases where these crafts explode and people find pieces or see it or see things, right? And then all of a sudden, the men in black, the MIB come in and pretty much take the evidence and say, if you ever talk about this again, dot, 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 dot. And the people end up going, no, it was a hoax. It's fake. Nothing. Don't look over here. Just like with the Sasquatch stuff.
Yeah.
So my working theory on this is that the government allowed this to happen, that the government either allowed this to happen or perpetrated it, caused it, and then made these people's story famous. I mean, you can't find an article on this without going through 30 different people's books written on this story. I have yet, in the however long we've been doing this and researching, I've not yet found one topic that's like that on the internet. So this story was blown up. It was publicized. It was publicized to the whites, to the blacks, to the entire United States. And then all of a sudden, everyone's looking for UFOs, right? That's not the
Right.
government. Those are aliens. I don't know. What do you think about my working map theory on that? I'm pretty much digging that. As soon as I saw it, I
It's
was like,
it's
yeah,
possible.
it could be. Because they want you to think, oh, somewhere in a galaxy far, far away, right? Like, what if it's over an ice bridge, buddy?
Yeah, it could be somewhere on this globe, far, far away.
Could be. There's so many weird things about it too. Like all the questions on like, well, and you see the wife was like wanting to figure it out and the husband wasn't. So is that different treatments? You know what I mean? Is it because the husband was, I guess, in a version of its own, like raped, and the wife seemed to have like conversations with these things while the husband's being dragged in this thing and like hooked up to some violative sexual device, and I mean basically tortured. But the wife's like having conversations and interesting things happening to her, and he's like going home and scrubbing himself and hiding in his room, and she's like,
Yeah.
I had a dream about this today. I don't know. I'm not too sure how much money these people made if they actually did. But I know they did certain TV appearances, but I don't believe these people died rich. Yeah, Jason, I'm not sure if these people ended up getting a break, a financial break. Maybe it could have all been BS. You know what I mean? Or it could have been real. But it sounds, ooh, Betty died in October 23rd of 2004, 85. Ooh, Barney died age 46, 1969. When was this? Oh, he did not live long. He lived 8 years, less than eight
After the
years.
encounter?
Yeah, after the encounter, he lived less than 8 years after this encounter.
Wow.
Yeah. What happened? Postal worker, civil rights leader was Barney, and Betty was a social worker and civil rights advocate. Betty. Very interesting. She lived to be 85 years old, and he only went to 46.
I wonder if it was really traumatic and he mentally couldn't
Couldn't
keep
handle
going.
it,
Yeah.
right? Maybe she was in on it, but he wasn't. Or maybe neither of them were in on it, but that's crazy. There's always something about the dog. They always say the dog was very important. And I'm not too sure why, but they always say that. The dog knows something, Jay.
The
Should have
dog
interviewed the
is
dog.
an alien.
The dog is the alien, bro.
He's observing.
He's the mastermind. They were little. It was a wiener dog. They were all wiener dogs inside a little alien. Maybe he wasn't a wiener dog. There's a picture of him with a wiener dog. Barney Hill hypnosis sketch, the first drawing of a gray. Oh, see, they're throwing that together. They're calling it a gray. That's crazy. How they could say it was a gray if he never said it. Has a little hat thing on its head with these weird big slanted eyes, slanted nose. Terrible drawing.
I'm pretty sure they are not the first, but they were the first to be documented, like a
Hmm.
documented case.
Right. Yeah.
By the description of them describing the aliens, like human-like but not entirely,
Hmm.
gray skin, blue lips. It sounds like those aliens, they've already been messing around with the gene pool and has been making hybrids. Because my mind keeps going back to that, like those agent-looking alien dudes. That's gray
Hmm.
skin, blue
Like
lips.
military almost.
Yeah, they're likely like a hybrid of the gray alien and the human. Like, you know how they impregnate women and they harvest the kid after so long, right? Um, and then I guess they indoctrinate them or turn them into soldiers or agents.
Hmm.
And then yeah, I guess they become
Sleeper cells.
yeah.
Very interesting. I really wish there was open content on this topic, but I'm telling you, man, it is all just book after book after book after book. I mean, which is the case if they had to sell rights to this, they definitely made some money. But
Well, you know what's happening, right?
what?
All the information that the upper echelon wants to be documented on the internet
Mm-hmm.
is documented on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And
That
the ones
makes
that they
sense.
don't, it's not uploaded or, scanned into the internet. And
Right.
it just remains in the physical book. And like these books, they deteriorate over time. So you gotta have a real like old school book collector that keeps books
Right.
pristine and like able to carry it through the years.
Right. Rewrite and burn, rewrite and burn. That's
Yeah.
why I watched that documentary. I mean, it was on BitChute. It was good. I'll tell you that much. I mean, these people actually knew them. So that was pretty cool. All I'm seeing is most of the the in-depth stuff going into is mostly focused on that map and trying and just straight up being like the aliens and the star pattern and that. I mean, yeah, how easy is it to draw a bunch of dots and be like, go find this somewhere in space? I'm literally saying like it's bullshit. You know, I mean, whether if it was real or not, but I could draw a couple dots right now and throw it on and be like, go find something that looks like this, especially because she drew it. That's the interesting part about that. Yeah, the focus is just indefinites, alien, space, the map, and they're all working off of that. So yeah, that's why there's a bunch of books and everyone taking their own tweak to it. But all right, Jay, anything else you got for me on this topic? Last thoughts, comments, any of that good stuff?
Nothing comes to mind. Like I'm not surprised that there are beings or up people out there that's doing this because we do it to other animals or even other people.
Yeah, that is true. It is
Yeah,
true. Crazy world we live in. It is. What do you think about the whole sucking off machine though? You think that'd be a cool thing, or you think he wasn't ready for it, or had some butt action too? What do you think about that? I'm kind of
uh,
kind of into
um,
that. I don't
it,
know.
he could have been raped and he didn't enjoy it.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, go from that whole missionary style to super futuristic sex toys forced upon you. Pretty sure it'd be weird, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
You're like the first guy who ever got his temperature taken in his butt.
Oh, yeah. The thing that comes keeps coming to mind too is like
You're gonna
those
put it
aliens
where?
sticking. Huh?
You're gonna put it where?
Oh, like the alien sticking the needle into her stomach.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they might be like extracting or harvesting eggs.
That's what they want to say though, because that's what they put in the movies. Why would they go through the belly button?
No evidence if you go anywhere else.
I'm pretty sure going through the cervix would be pretty easy, especially if had the technology. Why would you be using a needle through the belly button? I don't know. If I was to say any of it was relevant or true, in my opinion, there's a lot of DNA in the umbilical cord, which is attached to your belly button. Maybe there is micro amounts of thousands of years of DNA that can come from that. And then the sperm would have the same kind of DNA or lineage on that side. But that can be stored as well
Yeah.
and use. So not sure. Very interesting. So that is the Betty and Barney story for everyone. The alleged first original, biggest mainstream UFO abductees story right there. Did it the justice we can. Oh, last words. Everyone make sure to go to Rumble. I'm actually gonna start posting Rumble first. Rumble is we're the only place is where we're getting views and we're getting more and more subs every day without even posting anything. People really like it over there.
Nice.
YouTube has a shadow band like a motherfucker, and we're not getting nothing on YouTube. So they're just shutting it down. They're not banning us or giving us strikes anymore. They're just shutting the whole thing down. No, they won't show it to you. Even if you're sub, they're not showing it to you. No notifications, no nothing. It's pretty crazy. So
Doesn't even come up in search or anything.
I think it comes up in search, but you got to really be looking for what you're looking for.
Oh, you gotta actually be wanting to look
Yeah,
for it kind of
you
thing.
gotta hunt down the
It's
channel.
not suggested.
Oh, nope, not suggested on anything. No matter what we talk about, we could talk about how not even gonna go there. Actually. All right, thanks Jay for another good one.
Yeah.
We are out.